The last call I expected on a quiet Tuesday morning came from a neighbor I hadn't spoken to in almost 10 years. "Emily, I don't want to interfere," the elderly woman whispered, her voice trembling. "But I think you need to come home." 3 simple words. Come home. I had spent nearly 7 years working in Seattle as a trauma surgeon, living almost 2,500 miles away from the small Kentucky town where I grew up. Long hours, missed birthdays, cancelled holidays, sleepless nights. Every sacrifice had one purpose: to make sure my widowed mother would never have to struggle again. I thought I had succeeded. I couldn't have been more wrong. The neighbor hesitated before speaking again. "I saw your mother this morning, carrying groceries through the rain." I smiled faintly. That sounded like Mom. She hated asking anyone for help. But then came the sentence that stopped my breathing. She wasn't carrying groceries to her house. She was carrying them for someone else. Silence filled my office. "What do you mean?" Another long pause. "I think your brother has turned your mother's home into his home." My stomach tightened. "No," I answered immediately. "That can't be right." My older brother Nathan had always been stubborn, proud, sometimes selfish, but he loved our mother. At least, I believed he did. The woman sighed. "I hope I'm wrong, sweetheart. I really do. But your mama doesn't smile anymore." The call ended. For nearly 5 minutes, I simply stared through the hospital window. Below me, ambulances arrived one after another. Doctors rushed. Patients cried. Life continued. Mine had suddenly stopped. That evening, instead of driving home to my apartment, I opened a locked drawer inside my office. Inside sat a thick blue folder. Across the front were only 4 words: "Mom's future home." Nobody knew about it. Not my co-workers, not my friends, not even my mother 6 years earlier. After Dad passed away from cancer, Mom insisted she was fine. "I'm comfortable. I don't need much. I've got enough." Parents always say that. Children eventually learn. They're lying. Not because they want money, because they never want to become a burden. I refuse to let that happen. Every bonus, every overtime shift, every consulting payment, every holiday worked, went into one account, one dream, one promise: a peaceful retirement for the woman who had sacrificed everything for me. 2 months earlier, that dream became reality. I bought a beautiful farmhouse outside our hometown. White fences, wide porch, apple trees, a small greenhouse, and enough land for the vegetable garden Mom had talked about since I was 12 years old. The deed remained entirely in my name, not because I didn't trust my family, because my attorney insisted. "Transfer ownership later," he advised. Once she settled, I agreed. The paperwork sat inside that blue folder, completely finished, waiting for Mother's Day. I planned to surprise her. Instead, something inside me whispered, "Go home now." By midnight, my suitcase was packed. I requested emergency leave, booked the first available flight, and told absolutely nobody. Not Nathan, not his wife, Claire, not even Mom. Sometimes, the truth only appears when nobody knows you're watching. The next afternoon, my rental car rolled slowly through the familiar streets of Ashford, Kentucky. Nothing had changed. The old diner still stood on Main Street. The barber shop still had its spinning pole. Children still rode bicycles through the square. Everything looked exactly like home, until I turned onto Maple Ridge Lane. My mother's flower beds were gone. Instead, 3 large pickup trucks occupied the driveway. Construction equipment littered the front yard. A luxury fishing boat rested beside the garage. Brand new patio furniture covered the porch. I frowned. Nathan had always liked expensive things. But after losing his business last year, where had all this come from? Then I noticed something else. My mother's wind chimes were missing. She loved those wind chimes. Dad gave them to her on their 25th anniversary. She would never remove them willingly. I parked quietly across the street for several minutes. I simply watched. Then the front door opened. Claire stepped outside wearing designer sunglasses, carrying an iced coffee and talking loudly on her phone. She looked relaxed, comfortable, confident, like she owned the place. She laughed. I told them we're hosting Thanksgiving this year. Another laugh. No, it's basically our house now. My pulse quickened. Our house? Before I could process those words. The garage door opened. Nathan walked out carrying golf clubs, not work tools. Golf clubs? He climbed into a new SUV, worth more than the car I drove during residency. The engine roared to life. He never looked toward the backyard. He never looked for Mom. He simply drove away. Claire returned inside. Silence settled over the property. I waited another 5 minutes. Then I crossed the street. As I reached the backyard, I heard humming, soft, gentle, painfully familiar. Mom always hummed when she worked. The same lullaby she sang while sewing my Halloween costumes. The same melody she whispered after Dad died because words hurt too much. I rounded the corner and froze. There she was, Margaret Collins, 68 years old, bent over a wheelbarrow, pulling weeds beneath the blazing afternoon sun. Not in her favorite gardening clothes, but wearing faded work coveralls, several sizes too big. Sweat soaked her grey hair. Her hands trembled. Beside her sat 2 large trash bags, filled with yard waste. She struggled to lift one. No one helped. No one even noticed. For a second, I couldn't move. This couldn't be happening. Not to her. She finally looked up. Our eyes met. The rake slipped from her hands. Emily. Her voice cracked. Then came the biggest smile I'd seen in years. My baby. She hurried toward me, only to suddenly stop halfway. Her smile disappeared. She glanced nervously toward the house, then whispered, "You shouldn't have come without calling." Those words hit harder than any scalpel I'd ever held. Why? Would a mother be afraid of her own daughter visiting? I hugged her tightly. She felt lighter. Much lighter, too light. Had she lost weight? Mom. I whispered, "Are you okay?" She smiled again, too quickly, too perfectly. I'm wonderful. Every doctor knows that smile. It's the smile patients wear when they're hiding pain. I looked at her hands, small cuts, fresh blisters, deep bruises. These weren't gardening injuries. These were work injuries. What happened to your hands? Oh, she laughed nervously. I've just been keeping busy. Keeping busy. The same phrase people use when they don't want questions. I looked toward the house. Through the kitchen window, I could see Claire scrolling through her phone while sitting comfortably at the island. Air conditioning, cold drink, feet up. Meanwhile, my 68-year-old mother held heavy yard bags alone. Something inside me shifted. Not anger, not yet, something colder. The calm that comes before a surgeon begins an operation. The calm that says, observe first, act later. I smiled warmly at Mom. I've got a hotel nearby. I'll come back tonight. She looked relieved, far too relieved, as I walked toward my rental car. I glanced once more at the backyard. Mom quietly picked the rake back up and went back to work, as though nothing had happened, as though that was simply her place now. I drove away with one certainty burning in my mind. I hadn't flown across the country just to visit. I had come home to discover the truth. And whatever that truth turned out to be, someone inside that house was about to regret underestimating the quiet daughter who never forgot where home was. Emily barely slept that night. The hotel room was quiet, but her mind wasn't. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw her mother's tired smile, and the way she had whispered, "You shouldn't have come without calling." That wasn't the voice of a woman who felt at home. That was the voice of someone living under someone else's rules. At 6:30 the next morning, Emily parked 2 blocks away from the house. Instead of walking to the front door, she crossed the street toward the neighborhood cafe, where retirees gathered every morning. The small bell above the entrance chimed. Several older residents looked up. Within seconds, whispers spread through the room. Margaret's daughter, the doctor from Seattle. Emily ordered coffee and quietly sat near the window. She didn't have to ask questions. The town had been waiting for someone to ask. An elderly man finally walked over. "I knew your father," he said gently. "My name's Walter." Emily smiled politely. "I remember you." Walter nodded toward the house across the street. "Your mama isn't treated right." Emily remained silent. "Most of us didn't know how to tell you." "What do you mean?" Walter lowered his voice. "Your brother runs that house like it's his kingdom." Another woman joined them. "Your mother cooks every meal. She cleans. She does everyone's laundry. She even watches Claire's dogs." Emily's stomach tightened. "And nobody helps her." Walter shook his head. "They call it keeping her active." Emily looked out the cafe window. Her mother's curtains were still closed. She suddenly realized something strange. The master bedroom windows were open. Those had always been her parents' room. Yet she remembered seeing lights in an upstairs guest room late the previous evening. Something didn't fit. Later that morning, Emily knocked on the front door. Claire answered, wearing expensive workout clothes and wireless earbuds. For a split second, recognition flashed across her face. Then came a perfectly rehearsed smile. "Emily!" What a surprise. Claire leaned forward as if they were old friends. "You should have called." Emily smiled back. "I wanted to surprise Mom." Claire laughed nervously. "She's gardening again, I noticed." Claire stepped aside. "Come in." Emily walked through the familiar hallway. Almost nothing looked familiar. Family photographs had disappeared. Her father's military portrait was gone. The antique clock he restored by hand was missing. The hallway walls now displayed oversized black and white photos of Nathan and Claire. It felt less like her childhood home, and more like someone had erased her parents, one frame at a time. Nathan came downstairs moments later. He opened his arms for a hug. Emily hugged him briefly. "It's been too long." "It has." Nathan grinned. "You picked one heck of a week. Big family barbecue this Saturday." Emily looked around. "Really?" Claire beamed. "The whole neighborhood's coming." Emily nodded slowly. "So everyone's going to see the house." Nathan didn't notice the question beneath the question. "Exactly." Over lunch, Emily simply watched. Claire gave instructions. Nathan agreed with everything. Margaret barely spoke every few minutes. Someone asked her to get something. Coffee, napkins, ice, dessert plates. She never sat longer than 2 minutes. Finally, Emily spoke. "Mom, sit beside me." Margaret hesitated. Claire smiled politely. "Oh, she's happier staying busy." Emily looked directly at her mother. "I wasn't asking Claire. I was asking you." Margaret slowly sat down. No one spoke. The silence itself revealed more than words ever could. Nathan finally laughed awkwardly. "Mom can't relax," Emily answered quietly. "Or maybe she isn't allowed to." Nathan's smile disappeared. That afternoon, Emily offered to help clean the garage. Nathan immediately agreed. Inside, old boxes lined the walls. As they worked, Emily noticed several cardboard cartons marked with her father's handwriting. Family records, insurance, property. Nathan quickly pushed them deeper into a corner. We've been meaning to throw those away. Emily looked at him. Throw away Dad's records. They're old. Emily said nothing, but she memorized exactly where those boxes sat, around sunset. Margaret quietly knocked on Emily's hotel room door. She looked nervous. I brought pie. Emily smiled. You've never needed an excuse. They sat together for nearly an hour, mostly talking about ordinary things. Flowers, church, old neighbors. Finally, Emily asked, Mom, are you happy? Margaret stared at her hands. I love my family. Emily waited. Sometimes silence is kinder than another question. Tears slowly filled Margaret's eyes. I just don't want anyone fighting because of me. Emily reached across the table. No one is going to fight because of you. They're going to answer because of what they've done. Margaret looked frightened. Please don't make this worse. Emily squeezed her mother's hand. I'm going to make it right. After Margaret left, Emily drove back toward the neighborhood. The house was dark, except for one upstairs light. She parked across the street. 10 minutes later, Nathan and Claire walked onto the porch. They didn't know she was there. Claire crossed her arms. She suspects something. Nathan rubbed his forehead. Emily always notices everything. Claire's voice hardened. Then we need to convince your mother to sign before Emily starts asking questions. Emily's heartbeat stopped. Sign what? Nathan looked uneasy. I don't know. Claire stepped closer. If Margaret signs those papers this weekend, everything becomes ours. Emily slowly reached into her purse, pressed record on her phone, and captured every single word. She didn't move. She didn't interrupt. She simply listened. Because for the first time, she realized this wasn't just about disrespect. Someone was trying to steal far more than a house, and before the weekend was over, Emily intended to discover exactly what those papers were. Emily didn't sleep. She spent the entire night replaying the recording over and over. Claire's voice echoed through the quiet hotel room. If Margaret signs those papers this weekend, everything becomes ours. Not if they convinced her. When? That single word told Emily everything she needed to know. Someone already had a plan. Someone had already prepared the paperwork. Now she just needed proof. The next morning, Emily walked into the county recorder's office, just after it opened. The old brick building smelled of paper, coffee, and history. A grey-haired clerk smiled politely. Can I help you? Emily slid her driver's license across the counter. I'm looking for any recent property filings connected to my mother's address. The clerk typed quietly. A few seconds passed. Then she frowned. Interesting. Emily's heartbeat quickened. What is it? There haven't been any ownership changes. But she clicked another file. There was an appointment scheduled for Monday morning. Emily leaned closer. What kind of appointment? The clerk looked back at the screen. A property transfer consultation. Emily froze. Property transfer. Exactly as she feared. The appointment had been booked. Not by her mother, by Nathan. Emily thanked the clerk and walked outside. She didn't feel angry. Not yet. She felt focused. Years in the emergency room had taught her one important lesson. When panic takes over, people make mistakes. Professionals don't. She called the attorney who handled the farmhouse purchase. David Mercer answered on the second ring. Emily, long time. I need a favor. Anything. I need copies of every document connected to the farmhouse. David became serious. Did something happen? I think someone intends to steal my mother's future. There was a pause. Then he quietly replied, Meet me in an hour. David spread several folders across the conference table. The deed, the mortgage, the title insurance, the purchase agreement. Everything was exactly where Emily remembered. Then David opened another folder. I added something else. Emily looked up. What is it? A property protection affidavit. What does it do? If anyone attempts to pressure your mother into signing documents she doesn't fully understand, this gives you another layer of legal protection. Emily smiled. Prepare it. Back at the farmhouse, preparations for Saturday's barbecue were in full swing. Nathan rented extra tables. Claire supervised decorations. Neighbors came and went, carrying desserts. Everyone believed they were arriving for a celebration. Emily knew they were walking into a reckoning. Late that afternoon, Margaret quietly entered the kitchen, carrying a tray of lemonade. Claire barely looked up. Can you wipe the patio again? Margaret nodded automatically. Emily stepped between them. I'll do it. Claire forced a smile. No, Margaret likes helping. Emily looked directly into her eyes. No. My mother deserves to sit. For several seconds. Neither woman spoke. Then Claire laughed awkwardly. If you insist. Emily carried the tray outside herself. As she passed several neighbors, she noticed something. People were watching, not judging, wondering. They had noticed Margaret's silence long before Emily arrived. They simply hadn't known what to do that evening. Emily found her mother sitting alone beneath the old apple tree, the same tree where her father once built a swing. Margaret smiled softly. I used to think this was the happiest place in the world. Emily sat beside her. It still can be. Margaret looked toward the house. I failed your father. Emily immediately shook her head. No. I let everyone move in. I kept saying yes. I thought keeping peace meant keeping everyone together. Emily gently took her mother's hands. Kindness isn't weakness, but people who abuse kindness, they mistake it for permission. Tears slowly rolled down Margaret's cheeks. I was so afraid of losing my family, Emily whispered. You were never the one tearing it apart. Inside the house, Nathan searched through a desk drawer. Where are the papers? Claire crossed her arms. I left them right here. Nathan looked worried. We need Mom to sign before Emily leaves. Claire lowered her voice. If Emily finds out, Nathan interrupted. She won't. Neither realized. Emily had just walked into the hallway and heard every word. She quietly stepped back before they noticed. Now she knew. The documents were already inside the house. She simply had to find them first. Near midnight, everyone finally went to bed. The house became silent. Emily waited 10 minutes, 20, 30. At exactly 12:15, she slipped downstairs. Moonlight stretched across the hardwood floor. She moved carefully through the living room, then into Nathan's office. Desk drawers, cabinets, file boxes. Nothing. She turned toward the bookshelf. One binder looked newer than the others. Plain black, no label. She opened it. Inside, her heart stopped. There it was, a professionally prepared transfer on death deed. Another document, a limited power of attorney. Both listed Margaret Collins. Both required only one signature. Her signature. Emily quickly photographed every page with her phone. Just as she closed the binder, a floorboard creaked behind her. Nathan stood in the doorway. Neither of them spoke. For several long seconds, the room remained perfectly still. Nathan finally broke the silence. Looking for something, Emily slowly closed the binder. I think I already found it. Nathan's face changed. For the first time, his confident smile disappeared completely. Emily met his eyes without blinking. Tomorrow's barbecue. It's going to be unforgettable. She walked past him without another word. Behind her, Nathan remained frozen in the doorway. Because for the first time since Emily came home, he realized something terrifying. His little sister wasn't guessing anymore. She knew, and tomorrow everyone else would know too. Saturday morning arrived with clear skies and warm sunshine. By noon, cars lined both sides of Maple Ridge Lane. Neighbors laughed, children played in the front yard. The smell of barbecue drifted through the neighborhood. To everyone else, it looked like the perfect family gathering. Only Emily knew. It was the day everything would change. Claire moved confidently through the crowd. She greeted every guest with a polished smile. Nathan worked the grill, laughing louder than usual. Margaret quietly carried trays of food from the kitchen. Emily watched every movement. She noticed how her mother automatically stepped aside whenever Claire entered the room, how she apologized for things that weren't her fault, how she smiled whenever someone thanked her, as though she wasn't sure she deserved kindness anymore. That ended today. Just after lunch, Claire clinked her glass. "I have a little surprise." The backyard grew quiet. She reached into a white folder. Emily immediately recognized it, the same folder she had photographed the night before. Claire smiled warmly. "Margaret, we've been talking about making life easier for everyone." Nathan nodded. "We just want to help." Claire placed the papers on the table. "It's only a few signatures." Margaret looked confused. "What is it?" Claire answered quickly. "Just paperwork. So we can help manage the property." Emily stood. "No." Every conversation stopped. Claire forced a smile. "Excuse me." Emily walked slowly toward the table. "Before anyone signs anything, I think everyone deserves to know what those papers actually say." Nathan's face turned pale. Claire's smile disappeared. Emily picked up the first page. "This document transfers control of the farmhouse." She lifted another. "And this one gives someone else authority over my mother's financial decisions." Gasps spread across the backyard. Claire immediately interrupted. "That's not what it means." Emily calmly removed her phone. "I thought you might say that." She pressed play. Claire's recorded voice echoed across the silent yard. "If Margaret signs those papers this weekend, everything becomes ours." No one moved. No one spoke. The recording continued. Nathan's voice followed. "Emily can't find out before she signs." When the audio ended, silence settled over the gathering, the kind of silence that changes families forever. Nathan lowered his head. Claire looked around desperately. "They're taking it out of context." Emily quietly opened another folder. "I also visited the county recorder's office." She placed certified copies on the table. The transfer appointment, the legal documents, the dates, everything. Then she turned toward her mother. "Mom, no one is signing anything today." Margaret's hands trembled. Tears filled her eyes. She whispered, "I didn't know." Emily hugged her tightly. "I know." Walter, the elderly neighbor, slowly stood. "I've lived across this street for 30 years. He looked directly at Nathan. "Your father would be ashamed." Several neighbors nodded. Others quietly walked over to Margaret. Not out of pity, out of respect. For years, they had watched her disappear. Today, they watched her return. Nathan finally stepped forward. "I'm sorry." Emily looked at him. "Are you sorry? Or are you sorry you got caught?" Nathan couldn't answer. His silence answered for him. Claire grabbed her purse. "We're leaving." No one stopped her. She walked through the crowd alone, for the first time. No one followed. That evening, after the last guest had gone home, the farmhouse became quiet again. Emily, Margaret, and Nathan sat together on the front porch. No shouting, no accusations, only truth. Nathan stared into the yard. "I spent so much time trying to rebuild my life. I forgot whose life I was destroying." Margaret gently touched his shoulder. "I love you. But love doesn't mean giving away pieces of yourself. Nathan cried, not loudly, not dramatically, just honestly. For the first time in years, Monday morning, Emily and Margaret visited attorney David Mercer together. They signed new estate documents. The farmhouse was placed into a protected family trust. Margaret received lifetime security. No one could pressure her again. No one could transfer the property. No one could take away her home. Emily smiled as her mother signed the final page. This time, you know exactly what you're signing. Margaret laughed through happy tears. That feels wonderful. Over the following weeks, the farmhouse slowly became home again. The apple trees were trimmed. Fresh flowers returned to the porch. Dad's military portrait hung once again in the hallway. The old wind chimes returned. Their familiar melody filled the yard every evening. Margaret planted a new vegetable garden, exactly where she had always dreamed. Nathan moved into a small apartment across town. He found steady work every Sunday. He came for dinner. Not because he expected forgiveness, because he wanted to earn it. One quiet act at a time, Claire chose a different path. She left town a month later. Emily never heard from her again. Before returning to Seattle, Emily stood beside her mother in the garden. The sun was beginning to set. Margaret smiled. You know, I thought I had lost this place forever. Emily shook her head. No, you almost lost your confidence. But this was always your home. Margaret looked around at the flowers blooming in every direction. I don't need a perfect house. I just needed peace. Emily squeezed her hand. And now, you finally have both. As Emily drove away the next morning, she looked in the rearview mirror one last time. Her mother stood on the porch, smiling. Not because someone had rescued her, but because someone had reminded her that kindness should never come at the cost of dignity.